The menu theme sounds like Blankety Blank or something to me.
Yes.
With your host, Croc. Woo!
We have retiree Ruth from Pembrokeshire. She's hoping to win the washing machine today.
Is it Memory Card Lane without a dated TV reference?
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Do not adjust your television set, for it turns out that I am the host of this episode. So studious and thorough was my preparations that I did not realise until minute 1 of recording that I am the host of this episode. My name is Steve. With me, I have the illustrious Jordan, SerialBox64. Say hello, Jordan.
Hello.
And it's not Sherwin this week. Instead, we've got the boss in. Say hello, Signiac.
I'm showing.
The script is already going wrong. So
I've been told to expect chaos, so I thought I would bring chaos too. This is the show in seat.
You swore a lot less than Sherwin.
Don't worry, there is effing and jeffing yet to come.
So, as you may have figured out from the title of the video that you have clicked on, or you are a long-time listener of Patreon, in which case, thank you. This is a Memory Card Lane episode on Croc, the Legend of the Gobbos, or Gobbos, if you prefer. But with that being said, I don't know what else to say. I don't know. There's a script. There's a thing we say about Patrons. Jordan, can you do that bit you do about the Patreons?
Well, if you want to support the show, you can do so with a tier as low as $1 a month over at patreon.com/FASprayPod. We got a bunch of different programs over there, including Memory Card Lane, but also Tier Death Experience. So, all worth checking out. There's quite a few episodes now, hours and hours of entertainment available with early access on Patreon. So, if you want to support the show, if you like what you're listening to, patreon.com/FASprayPod.
Smooth. I like it. Thank you, Jordan. So let's start with like the straightforward stuff, shall we? The origins of Croc, the Legend of the Gobbos. Now, I believe this is mostly discussed online as this was Argonaut Software attempting to make a Yoshi game for the Nintendo 64, and they were basically snubbed by Nintendo and told, "No, bugger off, mate, we're doing our own thing," which turned out to be Mario 64.
And the relationship with Argonaut Software, they worked on Star Fox, did they?
Yeah, which is what makes it so weird to me that I know Nintendo are, very restrictive about who gets to do what with their IPs, but they seemed very cool with Argonaut for a while because they were like, make us a 3D game on a 2D console, and I think they worked quite closely with them to make the Super FX chip. It was quite an honor for them to be able to work directly with Miyamoto to create Star Fox and to make this little piece of hardware in certain Super Nintendo cartridges that completely changes that console. And then, they go to Nintendo and go, we want to do another thing. They get marched out, I guess.
Well, I'm assuming it was like maybe a tech demo or something like that.
I think it got to prototyping stage. I don't think it got particularly deep. It makes you wonder, as kind of you guys have alluded to there, Nintendo were seriously already considering or even deep into figuring out what a 3D platforming game was going to be. Apparently this Yoshi game was going to be like a kart racer, which makes, I guess that technically is easier to make in 3D than a platforming game, but apparently, Nintendo looked at it and went, that's interesting. Anyway, jog on.
That certainly explains the movement in this game, so maybe I could see that.
Does it?
Yeah, I was going to say, that information alone's boggling my melon a little, to be honest.
Croc doing Tokyo drifts as he turns just feels very kart-like to me.
Maybe. I can see what you're saying, but also, unless this Yoshi racing game was just like a bunch of tanks, I'm not completely sold. And now Yoshi in a tank is something that I've put out there into the universe, so whoever's Steve doing the edit for this, thank you for that Photoshop, which is now appearing on screen.
What else do we know about this game's development then? Do we, obviously Argonaut Software, renowned developing house, had a hand in the Super FX chip. They then get rebuked by Nintendo and go and team up with Fox Interactive. It was
Fox Interactive. From what I understand, they were already, I think it was early days, but they were working with them on a game already, so it made sense for them just to go to that publisher and be like, hey, we've got an idea for a 3D platformer, can we do that too? I think they were pretty friendly, but they wound up working on the video game tie-in for Alien Resurrection, which sounds like a whole other episode of Memory Card Lane right there, because that's a weird game, that is.
They're all over the place. They had a lot of stuff out there, including Buck Bumble.
Bibbidi Buck Bumble.
Exactly that one. That was on the N64, yeah. So they did have some degree of involvement on the N64. That was their only N64 game by the looks of it.
They did some of the Harry Potter games. I think they did Bionicle games as well.
Yeah, in particular, they did the cursed PS1 Harry Potter games.
Ah, yes!
Everybody looks like they're just melting into their own bodies.
It boggles to me my mind a bit. It reminds me of Silicon Knights, and how they bullied up with Nintendo for stuff like Eternal Darkness, where they second-party company basically go, let's do a thing with our IP, and then they eventually get that IP eaten. In this case, Star Fox, and then Croc. It just seems a strange cycle of history. That's another IP that's been sealed away by Nintendo, even though it's technically not something they created to begin with.
Maybe it's good that Argonaut kept a hold of their ideas and managed to do their own thing with it. And I mean, I know Croc didn't amount to too many actual major releases. They basically think it's Croc 1 and 2, and then some Game Boy versions of those, and that's about it. It's always interesting to look at these like, oh, it's proposed to this company, but they turned it down. Makes you think.
It says something that, like, the impact of it was big enough that I remembered it growing up, despite having never owned it.
I'm exactly the same, yeah.
A lot of people would say if they were thinking of, like, the first PS1 games, that come to mind when they think of the PS1, they probably think of Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII. But, at least from sort of, like, a UK perspective,
right.
Whenever I would go around somebody's house, mid to late 90s, and they had a PS1, I feel like there was always, like, the same sort of group of games that you were sure to see in the pile. Theme Hospital, Magic Carpet, one of Tomb Raider 1 or 2, Rayman, and Croc. For a time, those were the 5 most recognizable PS1 games to me, and it's kind of just interesting that Croc is the big 3D platformer among that. It's not like the big game that everybody asks for a reboot of, but I feel like it's the game that's from everybody's childhood in some kind of fashion.
Where's the YouTube CGI Unreal Engine trailer of Croc in a grassy field void just wandering around going splat? We don't see that. We see that for Sonic the Hedgehog, we see it for Mario, we see it for Pokemon, but poor old Croc can't get a look in that green, bland void.
Now, you see, if it was a Croc game, I would absolutely go up a bunch of watchtowers to unlock more of the map. I'd do that for Croc.
I think it's really interesting actually you say that, Jordan, because, and this might seem silly almost, but is it because Argonaut are a British developer? Is that why it seems so prevalent over here? Was it in loads of stores because of that reason? Was it a bias thing? Was it a production thing? We had access to more copies and so people bought more of it because it was always available. Maybe it was pushed more in our video game journalistic sphere, in our magazines and that kind of thing? Because you're right, I used to see it all the time and I never owned it. I always wanted to play it.
It did go platinum, didn't it? Or am I going crazy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did go platinum. I mean, when I say I wanted to play it, I played it a bit, but I never actually got to sit down and have a proper go with it, as I didn't own it.
It may well have been that it was in a lot more bundles. There were so many games that kind of got their popularity because they were priced at a point which made them easier to put in a bundle than maybe some other games or stuff like that. But also, sort of, we've already covered stuff like Jumping Flash on this show. When we look at the early PS1, it's a weird Wild West of IPs that are coming out. Nothing is quite the next big thing. The PS1 goes on to have such a large player base that all of those niche games end up carving out their own cult status to a certain degree. And I feel like Croc kind of deserves that to a certain extent. The amount of YouTubers that I watch videos of and they're using the music from Croc, or the amount of reviews that I see on Croc. Clearly it's had a big enough impact and visibility at a time when there was just so many games coming out.
It's a weird situation that we can all recognise. We're probably, I imagine, cart before the horse, I imagine we're not going to be the kindest to this little green fellow over the course of this this adventure, this memory card lane trip. But it's also a bit more than just an also-ran of Mario 64.
We're going to probably go through the run of, we'll be really harsh on it, and then round it back round to. Well, it did what it could.
See, I haven't written notes, but you're basically looking into my brain already.
Well, let's get started. Let's go with the real heavy stuff first. You know, the religious iconography, the deepest part, the lore, the narrative as a whole, the story, if you can call it that, of Croc, the legend of the Gobbos. I'm going to just paint you a scene, okay? You're at a riverbank. You are some kind of malformed tribble beast with giant googly eyes and a crown. You see a thatched basket with a green reptile hover over towards you along this riverbank. You take it with you. You raise it. It becomes a giant crocodile with a massive tooth, but you're somehow best mates with it. And then, this giant green demon man with a metal glove and a misshapen, miscoloured mohawk. He snaps his fingers, shoots lightning out of his hands and eyes at you, and kidnaps all of your fellow men, leaving your fate and your entire species, their fate, in the hands of this green, malformed reptilian beast. And that's pretty much the setup if you were King Gobbo, whose name completely escapes me.
It begins with a D, right?
King Gobbo, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I just want to point out the big green demon, by the way. Baron Dante, a needlessly comically evil name, that bad guy. Baron Dante.
He also looks like the frog bins that I used to have at my school. Like, he's got a big mouth, and he's got like a big jaw. I mean, they had some fun with the 8 polygons they were able to give Baron Dante.
Do you know what, though? I was just going to say, I think the character design overall in this game, like, just to kick it off a little bit, it's pretty good. I think he's a pretty cool looking villain. You can see him in like a, Saturday morning cartoon.
Do we know what he's supposed to be? He's supposed to be like a giant toad of some
I
sort.
want to say a devil because of his little dantinis, his little sidekicks.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like we can't have Bowser, so let's just do our own Bowser. Only he's flash as really, really cool mohawk.
You know what I mean? I loved the actual sort of character design of Croc himself. I used to draw Croc all the time at school because it was very easy to draw. Like, you don't even have to think about eyelids. It's just 2 ovals just sitting on top of, this big green schnoz, basically. So I think it's quite charming. I get that it's obviously very Yoshi inspired, but I can see why sticking that on the front of the cover appealed to so many people. Would you agree?
I agree, definitely. Like, it's an obvious one when you sort of like look at design in general, but a unique silhouette is always important when it comes to character design and these kinds of games especially. So, I mean, as simply as you say, he's just kind of like an upright crocodile with his eyes that just so happen to sit on top of his head, and he's got a backpack, and that's it. But, yeah, it's an inviting sort of shape for some reason.
It feels very much like he could have had his own 90s cartoon spin-off show. Like, he has that kind of charm to him, aesthetically. And, I suppose even the little tribble goblin things and the dantinis could be good enough. It's aesthetically got its own vibe. I'm trying to still figure out the whole point of the plot, because he literally kidnaps all these little tribble things and then proceeds to just find any wayward, like, small creature in his path and just flick his wrists and turn it into some abomination that's confused about the entire ordeal. Croc slaps it a few times and then we move on. It's not what I'd consider a sound villainous plan, is all I'm saying.
If you cannot answer the motives of an evil protagonist, it's usually just to take over the world, Yeah. It's just, and why not start with the Gobbos? They're literally balls of fuzz. What are they going to do against his spiky armor,
I will take on the lint beings, and then their enormous reptilian friend will perish. Also, look at that bird. It is now a giant abomination wobbly thing. Go kill that lizard. Plants.
For what it's worth, it feels like you don't necessarily need much of a story at this time for games. I mean, this came out 97, September 97 in the US, same month as Excalibur, fun fact.
No. I mean, that had a deep plot as well about the lady travelling through time to find a sword and then getting stuck in another time loop or some other...
Oh, imagine if, like, you're just playing Croc and one of the Gobbos is just wounded and it's asking for medical attention. I need medical attention. And it's just Croc, like, swapping booze for, some gems and stuff like that.
Just pointing at Croc going backpack.
He's got his backpack, yeah. But for what it's worth, Croc didn't really need much of a story at the time. I thought there was enough of a pull with the fact that, all these cute creatures have been locked in cages. You gotta go save them. I mean, it's literally the same thing with Rayman, but, it works. But motives, power dynamics, hierarchy, the geopolitical situation in Gobbo Land, we're not covering it. Maybe it's all covered in Croc 2.
I'm of two minds with it, really. Like, I have no issue with it having very simple, like a lack of voiceover and stuff like that. And it suits the sort of cutesy aesthetic that the whole game is going for. I mean, as you say, for goodness sake, your sort of MacGuffin species is just fuzzballs with googly eyes on. But it also comes out in the same year as something like Abe's Odyssey, which today has a tone and a story and a bunch of themes that are relevant. And I'm not saying this needs to be like a classic, but to have a villain who's just like, I'm evil, so I'm going to do the thing, and that's about it. Like, it extends outside of that as well, where it's like, there's a bunch of crystals. What are they? What do they do? What are they for? We're not even told that they're like powerful, like the Chaos Emeralds or anything. They're just collectible crystals that you pick up and they let you go to bonus levels. There's no justification for anything in this universe. It's just a setup for, look, it's a cute 3D platformer. So I guess, mileage may vary depending on your expectation, but it is a little bit lacking.
I was gonna make the argument that this probably came out before FF7, so it was before storytelling really got big on PS1. No. In fact, in North America, it came out in September 1997. There you go, boom. 3 hits. Croc, Final Fantasy VII, and Excalibur 2555. Which one are you going to pick up?
On the sliding scale of quality, I can't help but feel it's somewhat weighted on one side. Just putting it out there. Okay, moving on. Drawing a line underneath the story chapter.
Please do.
Mechanically, gameplay, where do we sit? What do we think? I am going to posit something, because everyone always compares it, and even I have, to stuff like Mario 64, whereas this, really, if you think about it through a certain lens, it's just like not just like Dark Souls, just feel like I say it all the time. It reminds me a lot of Tomb Raider. And this is going to sound crazy, but the tank controls, and the way that you actually manipulate the little critter, and the fact that it has a 180 move that you use a lot, it kind of feels like Tomb Raider more so, like a kiddie-friendly-ish interpretation of that kind of logic, only you're going through assault courses. Not too dissimilar to, I suppose, Mario, if Mario was more hemmed in.
Yeah, in a certain extent where, it is a bunch of rooms. I mean, they don't look like rooms. Most of them are just kind of bits of land floating in the air, and then you go down to sort of like the underground segments and stuff like that. As opposed to something like Mario 64, and we're going to keep making that comparison, which the levels are just sort of like, here you go nuts, go and explore, and that's kind of the design philosophy. This is kind of like, conquer the puzzle of this room, or, get through the obstacle of this room, move on to the next one, that kind of thing. It's interesting, but it does, and this is going to sound way harsher than I mean it to sound, but it does kind of like they haven't quite figured out what makes 3D platforming compelling and what worked about games like Mario 64. And it's hard because I guess you could also compare it to Crash, and it is closer to that in the sense where it's just like, here's a challenge, overcome it. I don't know, obviously nobody really knew what 3D platforming was. We just knew that Mario 64 was great, and every other studio was trying to pick apart why, I think. You can't just plonk a cute character in a cute world and go, there you go, that's it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Bubsy.
Yeah, Bubsy.
We see you over there looking all smug. Your time comes soon.
I mean, yes, you say Bubsy. Honestly, that's the problem, is that the level design philosophy here is actually dangerously closer to Bubsy 3D than I think it is anything else. Because the levels are they're like little miniature sandboxes, and I'm not talking about like sandbox gaming, when like sandbox means you're covering a continent. I'm talking about like when sandboxes meant literally just like a box full of sand, something quite sort of small. These little sort of rooms that really actually the threshold for clearing them is very low. As long as you reach the gong, that's pretty much it. You could maybe pick up some other items sometimes where it's like it's necessary to do so. But the rest of it is all about sort of collectibles, which I do like. Any level where there's something to kind of go back to and, collect the rest of is always compelling. Gold standard of it is stuff like Donkey Kong Country. But I don't know if there's, I at least can't remember any drastic penalty if you don't do everything in a room. It's more or less just get to the gong and go, you know?
Yeah. Each level consists of 6 gobbos, 5 you can find along its path, and then 1 hidden one behind the 5-gem door lock. And then I believe each world, and there are 4 worlds, has 6 levels, and then 2 boss levels, and then 2 secret levels. So there's a bit to chew on to get a completionist angle on these things. Each level has at least a set number of challenge to it, stuff you have to find. And then if you can complete all of that, you then get a bonus world that's an extra bit harder, which you have to then, persevere through to get the true secret ending, which I assure you, having done it today for the first time in my life,
well done, Steve.
Emotionally changed me.
I did a pretty thorough playthrough back some years ago when we covered it for Psy Reviews It. I definitely didn't get 100%. Is there any sticking points where it's actually hard to get 100% completion, or is it just a bit tedious?
I would argue that this is probably way ahead of it, but the last world or the last standard world's level of difficulty pervading over remixes of the first 4 worlds, like main iconic levels or their first levels. It can be kind of cruel, but there's not much to Croc in terms of when you fully die, except you have to restart level with the maximum of 2 lives if you completely wipe out. So it's just a case of memory, rehearsing the courses, and you'll get them eventually. There's not much in the way of hidden pathing, just a lot of cheat moves at times. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen when you're stuck in a level, there's a projectile enemy, and no crystals to start with, so you can potentially end up just having your lives burnt away. Nothing too, shall I say, stand out other than, hey, it's the first area only. Oh god, I'm dead. That's it. That's the remix areas, the remix levels, really.
I was wondering when when that video was going to come up in conversation. That was the last time that I played it as well, when we prepared for our YouTuber review of it. And I remember, like, a part of that was me being upfront about the fact that I messaged you and was like, yeah, I'm not finishing this game because I'm burning myself out on it. It's not holding my attention. What I will say about, when we sort of getting back to the crystals and the gobbos and stuff, is, as you say, Steve, and you can just kind of run through the levels from end to end. But it feels like half a game if you do that. Like actually going out of your way to find the things, tops that up a bit. Like, I could have just rushed from the point where I was burnt out to the end and just done the levels as traditional platforming game levels, and that would have been kind of boring. Like, at least finding the stuff adds something to do, although I do admit that I don't feel like there was also much worth in terms of, there's no reward. Like, as you say, you get the final ending, but you've got to get everything before you get that reward. You have to get every last one. So there's, for a younger player especially, there's no continuing incentive until you get to the end of the game and realise, oh, I've got to go back and scoop up all those things. Which again is fine for like a replayability thing. You don't have that many games, in this era. If you're a kid, you don't come around. Christmas only comes around once a year, etc. And apparently you picked Croc over Final Fantasy VII. Good job. I guess, it's something to do to replay. It's a weird dichotomy of like, yes, it does feel like that's an important thing to do, otherwise the levels are quite plain, but also doing that over and over again gets pretty repetitive, and there was no incentive as I went along to do it.
No complaints, really. I can't really disagree with that. The only reason I powered through in this recent rehearsal for this whole thing was because I need to 100% it. I have never done so before. And all I can really appreciate the fact is the closing credit. Yeah, the closing credits have a nice little charming message of Croc will return. Take care.
Well, he did, at least. He did.
It's the game going, take care. It's like, oh, they appreciated me spending my time. But then there's no like super Croc or any like way to replay the game in any exciting special fashion. So
imagine if this game had Super Croc.
You picked up the 5 coloured gems, and now Croc can splatter.
Yeah, I mean, Croc non-super is pretty hard to control as it is. Let's not give him super speed or anything.
just uses laser vision to hit the gong from 2 rooms over. Completes the stage in 1 second.
Butt bounce shakes the earth.
Speaking of like the controls, I feel like they're very opposed to the actual level design itself, because it's obviously you've got tank controls, but you've also got like a running momentum, where once actually Croc is moving forward, it's actually quite hard to turn Croc, and there's all these extra sort of strafing options as well, so it's very strange to me the way that they sort of designed Croc. Like, I feel like because of the timing of this, I believe like development sort of spilled over beyond what it was meant to, be forecast for. So obviously, it ended up missing the boat with regards to Super Mario 64 coming out. And once that was out, there was now already sort of, an established standard for what movement was going to be like in 3D platformers. And then you play Croc, and you're like, all right, it's sort of like a 3D platformer like Mario, but you don't control at all like Mario. It's really stilted.
I actually, as a slight defense to that, although whilst I do agree with what you're saying, you got to imagine that most of the development of this game came about before the original DualShock controller. So it was all done on D-pad, and the N64 had the advantage of having a controller with a stick, which gave you obviously a world of movement options, which nobody was really expecting that to be a thing. So
no, that's very true.
By the
that
same
is
token, though,
unfortunate.
Lara has a significant amount of mobility in the Tomb Raider games, and she's tank controls. She's very much was made when the D-pad was the thing and not the analog stick. I feel like we're being a bit generous to Croc, implying that it was difficult to achieve. I'm not saying she's a master class in maneuverability in the original Tomb Raider, but
glad. I was going to say, I see where you're coming from, certainly, and the control in Tomb Raider fits the game a lot better. I'm not going to say that it's any good, but it fits the game better.
You can sort of take your time with it, whereas with Croc, it's kind of expected that you're running and jumping. It's a platformer.
My allegory would be that Tomb Raider is like a Lego brick, and then Croc is that same Lego brick has been smoothed off at the edges like it's Duplo. It doesn't feel like it fits or moves as well. You can plug it in some places, but it's
knockoff Lego, is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically.
It's Lepin.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Which would you rather have, Timmy? Would you like Lego Star Wars or Lepin Strawa?
I'll have Excalibur, please, Mom. No, wait, that's still tank controls. Oh.
It's a shame that we do not necessarily have the experience of Croc 2, so I can't say whether or not the controls get better,
I
right?
can actually attest to it that he can now operate on an analog stick, and it does indeed feel somehow it's impressive. It's worse.
Oh no.
He actually has. I mean, your mileage may vary, but it's tank controls on an analog stick in the worst possible ways. In up is still up, rather than the dynamic stuff you would see in like Resi Remaster. It's pretty bad.
I think that sort of, and this gets back to what I was saying about Mario 64 and its explorative worlds. I wonder if the issue really comes down to the controls in the level design just don't fit for Croc. Like, his control system isn't necessarily bad, it's just how it relates to everything in sort of the levels, and everything's done I find myself doing stuff at weird angles, and the jumps I have to sort of like tilt myself round, and you always feel like I'm going to miss this because I'm going off at a weird angle. Whether you make it or not, it's like, it feels like a massive risk. It just feels very much at odds with each other. It's like they should have figured out one and then built the other around it, but it feels like they were kind of produced at the same time and then just smooshed together, and it kind of works, like Lego and Duplo or whatever,
It's a shame because it's like, I feel like when there's momentum in the game, it can be quite fun. Like, if you're just running in a straight line or, some kind of slight curve to the stage, and you got Croc in a run and you can, do things like his spin attacks, and so playing a little bit like Crash Bandicoot, which is good. But none of the levels are designed in that kind of way. There's lots of delicate work in that platforming in the latter half.
Emphasis on the platforming. Argonaut love this crocodile jumping every second. Like,
yeah. Why make like a bridge? Why not make 8 panels that'll drop very quickly?
to its credit, for early PS1 3D, there is a variety to the platforming. There just happens to be a hell of a lot of platforming, and then not really much else in terms of what you're doing to mobilize and move around the environment.
There is one other thing that you do, a lot of it,
yeah.
which is sitting on everything. He loves to bounce his butt on things. This bloke, he might as well not have a spin attack because everything is a butt bounce.
Yeah.
As far as Croc is concerned, you can do it. You just put your back into it.
I mean, that spin attack's useless. You've got two of them, and they're both the same. You can tilt left, you can tilt right, and you've got like range. There's no way to judge it really. Like, am I gonna get hit or am I gonna land a hit? Let's play that game. Or you go for the sure thing and splat them with your arse. It's a done deal, isn't it? The bum smash all the day. There is another form of locomotion we haven't touched on. PS1 swimming. It's here.
No!
It's glorious. I want to eat my hands. It's so frustrating.
That was quite a slog, and the only thing that I can say of some degree of praise is that I thought that they were going to do the swimming sections a whole lot more, and they chose not to, thankfully. Like, it's only in a handful of levels, but boy, that's enough. That's
they made a
enough
boss
for me.
fight with it. That's war crime material. Like, jeez.
So, what do we think of the bosses?
They're all the same, aren't they? They're all pretty much the same thing. You just kind of like avoid some stuff and hit them once, wonder if you hit them at all, because they don't have any like reactive animation to anything.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, you wait for them to whiff or get knackered or their chain smoking catches up with them, and you hit them once, and then they go oof. You hit them twice, they go oof again, and then you hit them a third time, and the game looks like it's frozen while Croc goes, "Wahey," until you press like the X button. And then you get a cutscene of them turning back from what horrible monstrosity they were turned into like a cute frog or a bird or an abominable snowman or whatever the frick Baron Dante's turned into a monster this week. Like, it's the same boss, yeah, just different attacks each time. Just wait for them to whiff. Easy.
It's also taking place in a sort of like a little mini arena, like whether it's a boxing ring or something that's kind of walled off in an enclosed space, which is perfect for a protagonist that has trouble moving in circles. Yeah,
I think the most involved one was the ladybug boxer fight, because in that case you've got to hit them with your tail and then booty bounce them. So I guess they take 6 hits versus everyone else's 3. That and the underwater one can just right off because you have to tail whip underwater. Swimming's a nightmare, so you can imagine landing a tail whip while swimming underwater is also a nightmare. Cheers, Argonaut. I'm glad you're dead. I mean, that's...
Imagine if they're not. Like, imagine if they're making Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
So, right, how are we feeling about the game's aesthetics? That feels like this is the game's saving grace.
Overall, I would say that's probably the case. We touched sort of on the cutesiness of it, and it maintains that throughout. I think graphically, it's fine. I'm not massively keen on games that have sort of. I can't really remember what exactly the stage is, but there's somewhere it's just like sort of dark expanse of space below you, and not like any. I wouldn't call it a ground box. It's not a sky box, but you know what I mean. It's nothing. It's just like a big black hole. And it's like, But overall, it looks fine. And I think the big star of the show is the sound design, the music. Jordan, you said YouTubers use it all the time.
Yes.
For good reason. It is top to bottom pretty great, the soundtrack, to be honest.
Yeah, it's charming. I think that there's a couple of tracks which maybe probably deserved some better instruments than that, but I don't know. Yeah, it works. It's quite playful, and I certainly enjoy it. As far as sort of like characters, I think all the characters are sort of nicely designed, and they really sort of pop, I guess. You certainly tell, what are the enemies versus your friends, and obviously I've already said that Croc looks great, and so does Baron Dante as well, for his part, and I think the only real sort of like letdown is that while it is bright, colourful, and certainly sort of at a time where there could be some really ugly PS1 games, the visuals are actually pretty nice, like texture works decent and everything. I just think there's not a whole lot of personality to the actual worlds themselves. They were very much. It is that kind of thing. This is the
general. Is what came to mind.
This is the general grass area. This is the lava area. This is desert, ice, and stuff like that. When it actually gets to sort of the later stage, and you are in that like strange sort of abyss, sort of climbing. You're meant to be, I guess, climbing up the tower to Baron Dante's castle. That was all right. Like, I mean, the whole Black Void thing is just. I mean, even Mario 64 had, some kind of surrounding skybox that you sort of dressed it up. But I kind of like that. In fact, I kind of like just the late game assets in general. There's a couple of like enemies that stand out a little bit more as well. But yeah, other than that, it could have done a lot better.
I want to take a moment and appreciate the fact that this is like 97 and we've got actually really detailed, for the time, polygonal characters that are recognisable in the cartoon space, at least. I mean, I think the only thing that's a creature that's not a polygonal model is the gobbos themselves. They're sprites, basically, with a pair of eyes. And everything's reasonably well animated. Just to put it out there, I know it doesn't look the best, but compared to stuff like Excalibur or Jumping Flash, these have animations. They move. Croc has his own little idle waddle, and it's reasonably well done. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Even if we have got Acme assets as the backdrops for every level. Musically, we're all agreed that it's the strongest part of the game. Yeah,
by far.
It boggles my mind because the composers, I believe, don't go on to do anything in particular note after this, and that makes me so sad, considering that their work is the backbone of God knows how many YouTube essays and things of this era. Particularly, like, if you have a YouTuber who does stuff about PS1 games and it's the more cheery stuff like Croc, like Spyro, if they're not using music from those games, it's this. And I don't think they've got any other names to any other bodies of work to their names, which frustrates me, because that's not fair.
I'm having a look. Is it Justin Charvona, main composer of the soundtrack Croc, Legend of the GOBBOS, and played a role in the soundtrack for Croc 2? Not heard the soundtrack for Croc 2. Is it going to top that opening menu theme?
Right. I also... That is great, but also, weirdly, the sort of like first level theme has been playing in my head the entire time we've been talking about it. That's also really, really good. Like, for a World 1-1 piece of music, is spot on. As sort of personality-less as the visuals might be, you get a lot of that out of the music, at least, so that helps.
It feels like somewhere between like a children's TV show and a quiz show. Like, is that
the menu theme sounds like Blankety Blank or something to me. With your host, Croc. Woo!
We have retiree Ruth from Pembrokeshire. She's hoping to win the washing machine today.
Is it Memory Card Lane without a dated TV reference?
That's what I'm here for. I do love to go and check out the likes of Moby Games and see where people end up. I'm always surprised by just how many times you'll find somebody who you think, well, that's a great piece of work. I expect that they had lots of other involvement in the industry after that point, and it's not the case. And I'm not exactly sure why that may be. If I were to hazard a guess, I think that maybe it could be down to the fact that they weren't necessarily working exclusively in the games industry, and at the time it was not, back in the 90s, it was not seen as sort of like a permanent role, a permanent job. Nobody had sort of like the title of video game composer. Even the video game composers were usually other members of the staff that then eventually moved to the music or moved to something else internally. It was an outfit where you were sort of a jack of all trades to a certain extent. But you do see it a lot, and it's weird how almost like hodgepodge 90s game development was, where you can kind of bring people in from all walks, and nobody necessarily sort of sticks around, but it's kind of the way that, forces combine to then produce something that, we're still talking about years later.
Yeah.
This, like, having seen the credits twice today, because Steve is MVP and has played this game to its completion, you know, just gonna...
Stop bragging.
But like, this game, much like a few others on Memory Card Lane, only has a small dev team. It's like akin to what would be considered like an indie dev title, really, of now, with like, you know, 6-7 people really chewing through it. It's when you think about the boundaries of the time, the technology of the time, that's really impressive in a weird way, at least to me. I want to talk briefly about the reception. I know we're giving it a bit of a roast, but I want to talk about the reception of the game, because generally speaking, it's a 7.5, 5s, you know, low rankings. And then you get the Sega Saturn version, and it's 9 out of 10.
Wow.
And I'm trying to figure out, did the Saturn have a drought of platformer games, or?
I think the Saturn had a drought of games, so that's probably why.
Yeah, I mean, that's not untrue.
Maybe it's a bit like, you know, Symphony of the Night had their own, like, exclusive levels or something like that. Or maybe it had a proper final world or something.
It's the secret hidden 6th world where Croc becomes Super Croc and shoots lasers out of his gesplat hole.
God.
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh no. May or may not be his mouth, like Godzilla. Let's keep it clean, you know. do we generally feel like it's a fairer rating to say the 7.5 range? I know numbers aren't normally a thing we do, but I feel like it seems still a bit strong, right? It seems like a bit too far above average.
Yes, I think that's fair. Like, it's certainly not a 9 out of 10. That is quite a ridiculous. I can't imagine what the Sega Saturn version does that makes it, you know, a stone cold classic like that. But it's 7 out of 10. I'm glad you said it, because I was thinking it. As much as I enjoy aspects of this game and I want to like it more than I actually do, I think 7 out of 10 is probably a little bit generous, really.
Yeah.
When you put it up against everything else that was coming out on the system at the time, it's kind of unthinkable. Well, I don't know, maybe everyone was just really excited about all the possibilities of 3D gaming. But yes, I mean, as I said, Abe's Odyssey came out the same year, and that's how, you know, that's surely got similar reviews. So how are they comparable? That's bizarre to me.
I think probably a fair score would probably be between, like, you know, 6 and 7 or something like that. You know, it's serviceable. It's not broken. You know, there's a couple of sort of design flaws, but there were plenty of games from this year and the previous that, you know, just had those sort of inherent, and you kind of forgive them to a certain extent because it was still a lot of sort of growing pains of 3D. But yeah, I wouldn't go any further than that. It's just like, this is the area where it needs
Full
improvement.
Yeah, because I mean, it's fine us looking now at the past and going, for a 3D platform, it was a bit.
For the record, looking into this a little bit, the Sega Saturn version was rated highly by Sega Saturn magazine.
Yeah, I did say that, yeah.
And Bubsy, looking at the review scores of Bubsy 3D when it came out, ranged truly across the board from like a 3 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10 to 82%. PS Extreme gave it 93%. So clearly, people were smoking some stuff in the 90s, because that is unbelievable.
I think the walls of that place were kept up exclusively with Bubsy 3D checks.
They bloody would love Croc.
How else did it get that kind of score?
Long before The Escapist and Kane and Lynch 2, you know. And
oh my goodness.
Some shady kickbacks going on at PlayStation Extreme. Uncovered here first on Memory Card Lane 20 years later.
We're going to read a copy of PS Extreme on Memory Card Lane one time. I want to see what these hacks were up to. I want to see what other games were getting carte blanche in their pages.
PSExtreme.com is still running. I don't know if it's the same thing, but there is a PSExtreme.com.
Is it not like a placeholder website for you can buy this for such and such money that we
No,
don't really
they're
want to?
publishing news stories as recently as 2 days ago. So.
Jeez.
Oh wow!
That Bubsy money went far, Jordan. Allegedly. I need to emphasise allegedly. Please don't sue us, PlayStation of the Extreme.
It's okay, Steve. You know, that paper trail is dried up. You know, it's Chinatown. Okay.
do we touch on lasting legacy? Does Croc have a lasting legacy beyond YouTube video music?
I was about to say, I think that's it, isn't it? I think it's fools like us who talk about it and wonder why it has this weird nostalgic hold, despite being,
It also ran of Mario 64.
Right, yeah. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but absolutely, it's the other one, and for good reason, is not held in the same regard as sort of Mario and Crash and their early forays. Not to say that it's terrible, but it's clearly inferior. And maybe there's something in us that sort of nostalgically looks back at something and go, well, you did your best. It's charming and such. Maybe that's what it is. It's kind of like, oh, everyone knows about Crash, but did you know about this weird green blob with eyeballs on top of his head?
Sorry, I'm just picturing Sai as the kind parent to the silly child. Like, yeah, you did your best. Let's put it work on.
I'll pay my friends off at PS Extreme. You'll be fine.
Jordan, what do you think on lasting legacy of Croc, Legend of the Gobbos?
It's puzzling to me, really, because clearly a lot of people do hold it in some kind regard. Maybe more in the UK than other places, but I just knew so many people who, if they didn't own Croc, they'd at least played Croc. They were familiar with it. That said, when I look at the sort of landscape of 3D platformers now, almost every 3D platformer of the 90s has had some kind of resurgence. Whether it was in the 2000s or whether it's been even more recently, where it feels like there's been some real inroads for course clear 3D platformers, much sort of in the vein of Croc. Yet Croc isn't one of them.
Yeah.
But all these other mascot sort of 3D platformers have since had some kind of resurgence. No one's asked for Croc, and no one's got Croc. So I don't know exactly. I don't even know what the licensing issue is with Croc these days. I don't know who owns it anymore. It's just a bit of a shame because it's just sort of like it's got a lot of charm as a game, yet no one's bringing it back. Maybe they never will bring it back. So yeah, if you love Croc, you only have like 3 games, and like one of them's the Game Boy Color one,
right,
which is apparently not very good, right? So
I was gonna say
that's the legacy.
Yeah, there's Croc and Croc 2 for the PlayStation. Those are video games, and then there's Game Boy Color titles, which are, I mean, if we said, Croc is a decent average game. If you think Croc is terrible, go and play the Game Boy game. You'll get a real lesson in hurt, because that's something else, that one. All the complaints we had for this pale in comparison to the Game Boy game, let me tell you.
The only other thing that I can think that is the closest to a spiritual successor is that depressing knockoff Croc's World. There are plenty of knockoffs of just about every IP, but the fact that this is sort of like the most relevant piece of media that is available, that you can say is, to some extent unofficially affiliated with Croc, it's a bit sad.
The problem is,
I feel like in the 20 years that there has not been a Croc game, there could have been something. There could have been something that came.
Do you want to know the worst thing about this is there's like 4 or something of these Croc World games at least,
yes,
which is more Croc games than their actual Croc games.
It truly is a world of Croc.
So I feel like it's probably time to summarise. Should we? Is that a safe thing to do as the host, Steve? Yes, it probably is, Steve. Okay, Steve, Jordan, your final thoughts on Croc, Legend of the Gobbos.
I think that it's a cute little game that had its flaws, but it's still surprising how sort of approachable it is today. You have to have some degree of sort of tolerance in the later stages, but you can still have a bit of fun with it. I think if every other 3D mascot platformer is having a shake at sort of like a reboot, then, maybe Croc deserves it. Maybe can sort of like, win something back with people with regards to the controls and, what does a Croc game look like these days? It would be fun to see. But obviously, I think a lot of it is tied with nostalgia. It's tied with, growing up with games like this where you would see it just about everywhere. And so I'll always have a soft spot for it. And I'm glad that we've covered it on Memory Card Lane.
Yeah, it's a weird one because you ever have this sort of, whether it's games or movies or whatever it could be, where your memories and your thoughts and your feelings on something are actually better than what it actually was, and you should probably just enjoy the memories. That's kind of what Croc is. I always wanted to play it more as a kid. It looked really cool, but it probably wasn't really. I don't know how much I would have enjoyed it. I probably would have ate it up because I was, way less critical and just kind of like, yay, video games, yay, cute mascot characters. But like, I wanted to play it for so long that I was like, okay, I'm doing the video game reviewer thing now. I can. I played the Game Boy version first for some reason, which made me want to play the PS1 game even more. And then when I did, it was like, oh, it's not actually that great at all. And I have a warm, nostalgic tingle for Croc's character design and the music, which is obviously, is great. And just the general, I think of the box, it makes me kind of warm and happy in a nostalgic way, but I don't think I'll ever play it again. It had its time in the sun. It didn't really carve its niche. It died off. It is unfortunate that Croc never got to come back. It would be nice for him to have another go around with a fresh palette, as it were. But I'm also not surprised that it didn't go further than... Well, again, I haven't played Croc 2, but I can't imagine that it was revolutionary. I'm not really surprised, unfortunately, that it's something of the past. So I will hold on to these warm memories and the important things that it's done for me and First Aid Spray, actually, as a weird part of our lore. And getting to sit down and talk about it again is nice. But I don't think I'll ever play it again, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think, as probably the one person who played this in their youth, like, nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Like, incredibly. When it comes to Croc, though, like, in the alternate timeline where Nintendo said yes, and we got that Yoshi game, or some iteration of Croc as this, the constantly parroted meme of Sonic the Hedgehog having a rough transition to 3D, replace that with Yoshi. It would be that level, because it's competent enough, but aside from the music, it really doesn't have much going for it. Like, aesthetically, it's okay. Narratively, it's got no real big hooks, no real iconic characters, just a bit of cutesy visuals. And then you've got the fact that it's just platforming with a awkward PS1 3D camera. It's not necessarily a pleasurable experience unless you can manage tank controls. But these aren't your dad's or your granddad's tank controls. These are your shifty uncles on drugs tank controls. So it's not the most forgiving experience, I feel like. And I very much wish I'd left this in my memories. Like Sai said, it's better to look back fondly, and now, unfortunately, I've tainted that. So I'm going to have to forget I've gone through this entire experience to remember Croc in a positive light, which is a hell of a thing to do. I want to just add, though, a bit of recent news. Like, we were talking about fans remaking things and stuff. There is actually an effort to remake Croc, as it turns out. During the recording of this entire operation, I've seen a fan-made trailer, which actually has a bit more life than your average UE5 Sonic walking around a bland-ass field, or Mario. So clearly, maybe there's people out there who care enough that maybe we can see a hypothetical new version of Croc. Although, to be fair, I would just say make your own new IP. Little else remains to be said, I think, than thanks for listening to this jaunt on Memory Card Lane. With me, I have had Sai. Say bye, Sai.
Bye, Sai. I was showing. Sorry. Bye, showing.
As you can see, it's an efficient and organised outfit. I've also got Jordan with me. Say bye, Jordan.
Bye, Jordan.
Right, yeah. This has been Memory Card Lane. I've been Steve. Take care.
Beautiful.
It's so stunted. Right, don't stop recording. We've got to do the wheel.
Oh no,
yeah.
The wheel.
So, we are now actually down to only 3 titles on the what do we call the wheel?
Proper name.
It's been months,
It's
and
now
I
the Wheel
forgot
of
what the
Fate,
wheel's called.
Okay, until we come up with something else, that's it. It's like Soul Reaver. The Wheel of Fate is always spinning, Raziel.
Well, the 3 names on there are Overblood, Shadow Man, and MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries. Might as well state this now. MechWarrior 2 may change. It depends on if we can get it running or not. But we shall see if we land on it. So, it's time to spin that wheel. Okay, it's spinning now, and we are going to be playing Overblood.
No! I'm hosting again!
Yay! Steve's hosted again.
Ah!